His hand gripped her chin roughly, fingers digging into her jaw hard. He forced her to look at him, to meet those dead eyes.
Do you have any idea what you did in that restaurant?
His voice was soft, conversational, but there was venom underneath, poison waiting to strike. 7 years. 7 years I spent planning that perfect moment, acquiring that poison from contacts in 3 different countries, bribing chemists, waiting for exactly the right opportunity. His grip tightened until she whimpered. That poison was untraceable, undetectable. I would have walked away clean, taken over his territory, his contacts, his entire empire. A pause, and you ruined it, with a kiss, he said. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I didn't mean to interfere. I didn't know. You didn't mean to destroy 7 years of careful planning? He released her chin with a sharp movement and began to pace around her in slow circles. You didn't mean to humiliate me in front of Seoul's elite when Kang Min-ho chose you over our partnership? He asked. He stopped behind her. She couldn't see him anymore, could only hear him. Kang Min-ho took everything from me because of you. His hand touched her shoulder. She flinched violently. So now I'm going to take something from him, something he clearly values more than money or power, he said. If you do anything, Min-ho will have even more reason to destroy you, and you know that, Samara whispered. He laughed, loudly, like she had said something genuinely amusing, then pulled a chair close and sat directly in front of her. Let me tell you something about Kang Min-ho. He started. She said nothing. Your husband needed a wife, not a lover, a symbol. He tilted his head. Do you know what it does for a man like him to walk into a room with a woman like you on his arm? It tells every foreign investor, every Western partner, that Kang Min-ho is modern, progressive, that he doesn't see color, that he looks beyond borders. The contempt in his voice was precise. Surgical. A black woman on his arm. Powerful. Beautiful. It was the perfect statement. A win-win. Samara's jaw tightened. The words landed somewhere soft. She didn't want them to. You were never a choice, he said gently. You were a strategy. The kiss at the restaurant was a gift he didn't even have to engineer. You handed him the perfect excuse. You're lying, she said. Smaller than she intended. Am I? He stood, walked to the window. Then where is he, Samara? You've been here for hours. His men are everywhere in this city. He has resources that could locate anyone within minutes. He glanced back at her. Where is Kang Min-ho? Silence. A man who actually cared would already be here, he finally said. She tried to hold back. She failed. 1 year fell, then another, hot and humiliating against her cheek. You don't know anything about him, she said, ragged. You don't know what he would or wouldn't do. His smile didn't waver. You'll understand soon enough. He straightened his cufflinks, adjusted his jacket. But we don't have all day. He walked to the case on the table, row after row, neat, clinical, the kind of organized that meant practice. And he reached in and lifted out a thin metal rod tapered to a fine point, turned it once in his fingers, then looked at her, and started walking toward her. Min-ho, she thought, please, find me. Before we continue, please like this video and comment, Min-ho come through, if you need him to get there in time. Because what's about to happen in this room is going to test everything she's made of. Stay with us. 3 hours earlier. Busan. The docks smelled like salt and rust. The Red Viking's warehouse sat at the edge of the water like it had been dropped there and no one had bothered to move it. Corrugated metal, peeling paint. 3 men outside who were trying to look like they weren't afraid. They were afraid. Kang Min-ho's car came to a stop at the entrance and the guards didn't move, not because they were brave, but because their legs had temporarily stopped working, because everyone in Korea knew that car, everyone knew that face. Kang Min-ho stepped out without hurry, straightened his jacket, looked at the warehouse like he was assessing whether to buy it or burn it down. He hadn't yet decided which. He'd left Seoul before dawn, driven 3 hours straight to Red Viking's territory. He had a plan, a briefcase full of cash, and a very specific message to deliver. He hadn't said anything about it to Samara, and he intended to keep it a secret to be kept until tonight. He had prepared everything for their evening, the surprise date overlooking Han River. He couldn't wait to see the look on her face when he'd tell her he handled everything. He walked past the guards without acknowledging them. One of them finally found his voice. "Sir, this is Private Prop." Minho looked at him, just looked at him. The man went quiet immediately. Inside, word had already spread. He could tell by the way every man in the building stood up straighter. Weapons disappeared. Postures went rigid, the particular brand of panic that visited people who suddenly realized they were in the presence of something genuinely dangerous. The supreme leader of the Red Vikings came out from the back, mid-40s, built like a man who had survived things that should have killed him several times over, scarred jaw, careful eyes, trying, working very hard, not to look the way he felt, which was like a man standing barefoot on a cliff edge. He bowed low. "Mr. Kang." His voice was controlled. Barely. "This is unexpected. To what do we owe this honor?" "Samara Okafor," Minho said. "Her debt." What's the total?" The man blinked. Whatever he'd been expecting, it wasn't that. It currently stands at $500,000, sir, with the accumulated interest and late penalty fees closer to 6. Minho set the briefcase on the nearest table, clicked it open. The cash was stacked in neat bricks, organized, almost beautiful in the way obscene amounts of money sometimes were. "1 million, Minho said. "The debt is paid. Everything she owes, everything she has ever owed you, is settled. Today. Now." The room had gone completely silent. The leader stared at the money for a long moment. His men were staring too. $1 million in cash had a way of making a room very still. Then the leader looked up, and something in his expression shifted, calculated, at the look of a man who had just seen an opportunity and was deciding whether to reach for it. "Mr. Kang," he said carefully, "this is very generous, but we also have to consider the inconvenience. The time we've spent tracking." Minho's hand moved so fast that 3 of the men nearest to him flinched backward. He had the leader by the collar. One hand, his knuckles had gone white. "I want to be very clear about something," Minho said, his voice dropping to something barely above a murmur, which was somehow more frightening than any shout. "I drove 3 hours to be here. I came in person, to your building, with more money than your entire operation has earned this quarter, to handle this quietly and cleanly. I am giving you every possible opportunity to make the right decision." He pulled the man slightly closer. "Oh, and I suggest you take it." The leader's bravado had evaporated completely. His throat moved as he swallowed. "Yes, sir. Of course. The debt is settled. In full. No further—" Minho released him, took one step back, straightened his own jacket. "And if I ever hear that any of your men have gone near her again," he said, very calmly, "or spoken her name, or breathed in her general direction, I will come back to Busan, and what would be in that briefcase wouldn't be money this time." "You understood, Mr. Kong. Completely understood." Minho nodded once, turned to leave, and then the leader said it. "Mr. Kong, wait. There's something you should know," he said. Minho stopped. Something in the man's voice had changed. The performance was gone. What was left underneath sounded genuinely like a man who understood that he was about to deliver news that might get him killed. "What?" he said, not a question. The leader exhaled slowly. "She's gone, sir. We, sold her. This morning by 11. The air in the room changed. Minho turned around, very slowly. "We received a contact late last night," the man continued. He was speaking faster now, the words tumbling over each other. "Your business partner, sir, Park Jae-won, he reached out directly, offered double what she owed, said he wanted her specifically, for personal reasons." A pause. We thought she'd never pay back. We didn't know. Minho had crossed the room in 3 strides, his hand connected with the man's face before either of them had quite registered it was happening. The crack of his jaw echoed off the metal walls. The leader stumbled sideways into his own men. Minho stood over him, chest rising and falling. The rage was running through him like electricity. He wanted to do more. He wanted to take the room apart piece by piece, starting with the man currently bleeding on the floor. But he checked his watch. 3 hours. She'd been with Park Jae-won for 3 hours. He stepped back. "Where?" he said. "His estate, sir. Gangnam District." The leader wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "We can give you the exact address." But Minho was already moving. He walked out of that warehouse at a pace that made his men, who had been waiting by the cars, immediately straighten. "The estate," he said, pulling out his phone. "Gangnam. I need the exact address in 30 seconds. I need 12 men ready to move. I need the car at the gate when we arrive." He was in the driver's seat before he'd finished speaking. "And if anyone asks questions right now, they must be doing it from the side of the road." He drove, and he did not slow down once. The silence had stretched for almost an hour when he spoke again. "Tell me something," Park Jae-won said, playing with one of the tools from where he was standing by the window. He hadn't moved from that spot. Patient as a statue. Patient as something that had learned to enjoy waiting. "What did you think was going to happen? The night at the gala? When you kissed him?" Samara said nothing. "You're a clever girl, so don't pretend you weren't thinking anything. You acted on impulse. You saw a man about to die, and your instincts overrode your judgment." He turned to look at her. "What was it? Compassion? And heroism? Or were you trying to gain something from him? Was this all a plan from the start?" Silence. No answer. He walked toward her slowly. "That tells me everything." "It tells you nothing," Samara said quietly. He paused. She raised her eyes to his. Her face was still wet from earlier. Her wrists hurt from the rope. Every part of her was exhausted and afraid and furious, but she held his gaze. "You think you understand him?" she said. "You think you know what he values and what he doesn't. You spent years planning how to take something from him." She tilted her head. "But you got it wrong. Because if you actually knew Kang Minho, you would have known that the moment you touched me, you signed your own death certificate." Something flickered behind his eyes, not quite amusement, not quite anger. "Confident words," he said. "Ugh, for someone tied to a chair." He stepped closer, reached out to touch her face. She turned her head sharply away. He grabbed her chin. She let him hold it for exactly 3 seconds. Then she gathered everything she had, every drop of defiance, every ounce of rage, and kicked him in the groin and spat directly in his face. He staggered back, jaw tight, a thin muscle jumping in his cheek. He reached up slowly and wiped his face with the back of his hand. His eyes had gone flat and cold in a way that was almost more frightening than the heat that had been there before. He moved. His hand locked around her arm, hard, bruising, and he yanked her upward, chair tipping, rope pulling taut, her whole body wrenching with the force of it. She cried out. He was saying something, his voice low and vicious now. The performance finally cracked. The door exploded off its hinges. Wood, metal, splinters. The sound was enormous, a percussive crack that seemed to rearrange the air in the room. Everyone froze. Kang Minho stood in the destroyed doorway. His suit jacket was gone. His shirt was open at the collar, sleeves rolled up, knuckles split open and bleeding from whatever had happened at whatever door came before this one. His chest heaved. His eyes were burning, not with panic, not with desperation, with something much quieter and much more dangerous. Pure, concentrated fury. "Step away from her," he said. "Now." His voice was almost pleasant. That was the terrifying part. Park Jae-won released her arm. He spun around. "How did you... You were in Busan. There's no way you could have..." Minho crossed the room. 1 second he was at the door. The next he had the man by the throat, lifting him off the ground, slamming him against the wall so hard the artwork rattled. "You touched her?" Minho's voice was quiet, deadly, more terrifying than any scream. "You fucking touched my wife?" Jaewon gasped for air, clawed at Minho's hand uselessly. Minho's grip tightened. "Answer me." Jaewon's face was going pale. "Minho." Samara's voice broke. Minho ignored her, his eyes locked on Jaewon's. "Minho, stop. Please," she begged. He looked at her, just for a second. His eyes met hers. The tear tracks, the way she was holding her arm against her side. The rage was still there, burning, consuming, but underneath it was something else. Fear. Raw, genuine fear. His jaw tightened. He released Jaewon. Let him fall. Then he was at her side, dropping into a crouch in front of her, yet his hands, still bleeding, working at the knots in the rope with a carefulness that was almost strange to watch after what he'd just done. "Are you hurt?" He was already scanning her face, her arms, her wrists. "Tell me where." "I'm okay," she said. Her voice came out unsteady. "My arm, where I see it." He kept his voice level. His hands kept moving. "Can you feel your fingers?" "Yes." "Good." The last knot came loose. He helped her to her feet, one hand at her back, steadying her while her legs figured out how to work again. She stood, and then something cracked open inside her chest, everything she had been holding compressed and tight for the last several hours, and she was crying, properly crying, ugly, heaving, undignified crying. "You left me. I thought you were gone," she said, her hands fisted in his shirt. I kept waiting and you didn't come, and I thought you had changed your mind, about all of it, about me." His arms went around her, tight. He held her with the particular desperation of someone who has spent 3 hours imagining the worst. "I know," he said, low, into her hair. "I know. I'm sorry." "I thought you had decided it was too much trouble." She pulled back to look at him, cheeks wet. "I thought you had decided I wasn't worth it." "Samara," he began. "I was sitting in that chair telling myself you were probably in a boardroom somewhere." She continued without thinking. "Samara." His hands came up and cupped her face, thumbs against her cheekbones. He made her look at him. "I was in Busan," he said. She blinked. "What?" "I was in Busan." His eyes stayed on hers, steady and serious. "See, I drove 3 hours before dawn to walk into the Red Vikings headquarters and pay off your debt. Every cent. All of it. It's all gone now." Her breath stopped. "My brother is safe. I'll tell you everything. But right now I need you to understand that there is not a version of this world where I leave you. Do you hear me?" he said. She stared at him. Behind them, Jaewon had recovered enough to try to crawl toward the door. "Take him to the facility," Minho said to his men without looking back. "Lock him in the basement. I'll deal with him personally. Later." They dragged the man away. His screams echoed down the hallway until they faded to nothing. Minho turned back to Samara. She was still staring at him, processing. "Busan?" she said. "Busan." He nodded. "This morning?" "Before sunrise." Something crossed his face. "I had the plan already. I was going to come back tonight and take you to the Han River." He stopped. "I had the whole evening arranged. A surprise. I was going to tell you over dinner." Samara blinked. "A date?" "A date," he confirmed, and then something sharpened in his expression. "Which brings me to something else." He looked at her steadily. "I told you to stay in the penthouse." She felt the shift. "Minho, I told you specifically. I left 3 men. I left instructions. I told you to stay inside and under no circumstances should you leave without supervision." His voice was still calm, but there was an edge running underneath it now, controlled and precise. "What happened?" "I was so anxious. I didn't know what to think," she started. Minho sighed. "I had everything arranged," he said, the calm fraying slightly at the edges. "I had tonight planned down to the last detail, and instead I was so worried I spent 2 hours driving back from Busan like a—" He exhaled, collected himself. "You could have been seriously hurt." "I know," she said. I need you to actually understand that I need you to stay where I tell you to stay, not because I enjoy giving orders, but because the people who want to use you against me are not careful or gentle or interested in whether you walk away intact. Do you understand that? He said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said quietly, "You had a date planned?" A beat. "Yes," he said. "Overlooking the Han River?" she asked. "That was the plan. I was going to tell you everything then. Surprise you, I guess," he said. "I've never actually sat by the Han River at night," she said. Her voice had gone soft. I've walked past it 100 times. I've looked at it from buses and taxis and through other people's windows, but I've never just sat there, with food and candles and Samara." He knew where she was headed. "I'm just saying, it sounds like it would have been beautiful." She shrugged. He looked at her for a long moment. "It would have been," he said, "but now it's ruined," she added. "And now it's ruined," he agreed, "because you decided to leave the penthouse." "I want to register a complaint about the direction this conversation has taken," she pointed out. Something moved across his face, not quite a smile, something quieter than that, but in the same family. "We're leaving," he said, "and you're seeing a doctor tonight whether you want to or not." "I barely have any injuries. A doctor, Samara." His voice was firm. Minho, my arm is fine. I'm fine. Could we just go to the river? Just for an hour? Even without the dinner. Just the river," she said. "You were tied to a chair 3 hours ago." He frowned, "Which is why I would like to sit somewhere nice now. Besides, won't it be such a waste of money to just—" she started. "A doctor," he said firmly. "Then home. The river will still be there. It doesn't have any legs." She opened her mouth. He gave her a look. She closed her mouth. He put his hand at the small of her back and steered her toward the door, and she let him, because the truth was that her arm did hurt, and her legs were still slightly unsteady, and the warmth of his hand through the fabric of her shirt was making her feel safer than she had felt in hours. "For the record," she said as they stepped out into the hallway, I think this is an overreaction." "For the record," he said, "I spent 3 hours in a car imagining what I was going to find when I got here. Everything I do tonight is a proportionate response." She glanced up at him. His profile was still tight, still carrying the weight of those 3 hours in every line of his face. She didn't argue anymore. The private doctor arrived at the penthouse within 20 minutes of them walking through the door. She was thorough, professional, and clearly accustomed to being called at odd hours by Kang Min-ho's people, because she asked no questions about context and simply did her job with quiet efficiency. Bruising on the arm, minor ligature marks on the wrists, no serious damage. Min-ho stood in the doorway of the bedroom the entire time the doctor examined Samara, arms folded, on watching with the focused attention of a man cataloging every finding. "She's going to be fine," the doctor said on her way out. "I heard you the first time," Min-ho said. "I just wanted a second opinion." The doctor looked at him. "Mr. Kang, I've been saying she's fine for the last 20 minutes, and I appreciate your consistency," he said, still focused on Samara. After she left, Samara sat on the edge of the bed with a cold pack on her arm and watched Min-ho standing by the window with his arms still folded and his jaw still tight. "You can stop now," she said. "The crisis is over." "Is it?" he asked. "She said I was fine." "She said you were fine physically," he corrected. Samara looked at him for a moment. "I'm fine every way, Min-ho." He turned to look at her, searched her face. Then he exhaled, long and slow, and some of the tension in his shoulders finally released. "You split your hand," she gasped when her eyes catch the gash. "You're bleeding on your carpet." He looked down, looked back up. "Worth it." "Go put something on that," she said. "I'm monitoring the situation. Kang Min-ho, go put something on your hand." Her voice was the firmest he'd heard from her before. He obeyed. She listened to him moving around in the bathroom, the water running, the quiet of the penthouse settling around her like something solid and safe. She pressed the cold pack to her arm and looked at the ceiling. He had driven to Busan before sunrise to pay off her debt. He had been planning a dinner by the Han River. He had come through the door, apparently, with blood on his knuckles and rage in his eyes and her name already on his lips. She pressed her free hand flat against her sternum, right where the feeling was pooling. She didn't have a word for it yet. She was going to be very careful about putting a word to it. But it was there. Weeks passed. The bruises faded. The rope marks on her wrists disappeared. The nightmares came less often. Life inside the penthouse found its rhythm again, cautious and new, and punctuated by arguments about whether Samara was allowed to go to the market alone, she was not, and whether Minho was allowed to work through dinner, he was not. Minho said nothing about the Han River. She assumed he had forgotten. She was wrong. On a Thursday evening in October, one of Minho's men knocked on the door to the sitting room where Samara was reading and told her, with a perfectly straight face, that Mr. Kang had requested her presence downstairs. She went down. Minho was standing by the door, dressed, which was unusual. He was holding a long silk scarf. She looked at the scarf. "What is that for?" "Turn around," he said. "Excuse me?" "I'm not going to answer your questions. Turn around," he insisted. She looked at him for a long moment. "You know, most people lead with please. Most people are not me." He held up the scarf. "Turn around, Samara." She turned around. He tied the scarf over her eyes with careful hands, checked that it was snug, checked that she could breathe. Then he guided her to the door with one hand at her back and one at her elbow, and she let him. No, because she had learned by now that when Kang Minho had a plan, the results were generally worth the process. The car, the city passing in muffled sound around her, the cool night air when the door opened. His hand stayed on her the whole time. "Steps," he said. "3 of them. Small." She found them with her feet. "Almost there," he encouraged. She could hear something. Music. Low and sweeping. Strings, she realized. Violins. A classical piece she half recognized from a concert she had attended years ago, the kind of music that sounded like something significant was happening. Then he stopped her. His hands went to the knot at the back of her head. "Ready?" he asked. "I've been blindfolded in a moving car for 20 minutes, so, yes, I think I'm ready," she began. The scarf fell. Samara stopped breathing. The Han River stretched before her in the dark, the lights of Seoul reflected across its surface in long gold ribbons. And there, at the edge of the water, lit by hundreds of candles and paper lanterns that floated above in warm amber, was a table set for 2. Flowers everywhere. The white ones she had mentioned once, offhandedly, in a conversation she hadn't thought he was paying attention to. A string quartet played nearby. The food, her favorites specifically, impossibly specifically, was laid out in careful arrangements on plates that probably cost more than her previous month's rent. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Her hand came up to cover her mouth. "I told you," Minho said, from somewhere just behind her. "The river doesn't have any legs." "You remembered," she said. Her voice had gone very small. "You mentioned the Han River twice in the car that night. You mentioned it again 2 weeks later when we drove past. You mentioned it last Thursday at breakfast when you saw it in the background of something on television." He paused. "I pay attention," he added. She turned to look at him. He was watching her with an expression she had learned to read by now. The one that looked like composure, but was quietly doing something much more complicated underneath. "Minho." Her voice broke. "Sit with me first," he said. "Eat something." The food took considerable effort to coordinate. She sat. He sat across from her. The music played. The lanterns shifted in the breeze. The city blazed on the other side of the water. They ate slowly. They talked. About small things at first, and then about bigger ones, and then about the kind of things people only talk about when they have run out of reasons to be careful. When the plates were nearly empty, Minho set down his fork. He looked at her across the candlelight. "I want to tell you something," he said. "Okay. This arrangement," he stopped, tried again. "The contract. And I want you to know that I didn't choose it because it was the only option." His eyes stayed steady on hers. There were other ways to protect you. Witness relocation, safe houses, security details, ways that would have kept you safe without requiring you to share your life with a man like me. She said nothing. Let him continue. I chose this because I wanted you close. His voice was even, direct. From the moment you kissed me in that restaurant, something shifted. I have spent 7 years building walls that nothing and no one could get past. 7 years of being very precise about what I allow near me and what I don't. A pause. You got past all of them, without even trying, without even knowing. Her heart was doing something it had no business doing. Minho, she breathed. Let me finish. Annette, he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, pulled out a small box, set it on the table between them. She looked at it, then at him. He stood up, walked around to her side of the table, and then, in full view of the Han River and the string quartet and the city she had come to love that had never quite felt like home until now, Kang Minho got down on one knee. I am not interested in the contract anymore, he said. I am not interested in arrangements or terms or end dates. I want to do this the right way, the real way. He opened the box. The ring inside was simple. 1 stone, perfect. The kind of ring that didn't need to shout. Will you marry me? He asked, his eyes yearning. Not because it's convenient, not because it protects either of us, because I love you, Samara. Or because you are the only person I have ever met who looked at everything I am and decided not to leave. Because you spat in a dangerous man's face while tied to a chair, and I am never, ever going to get over that. Something moved in his eyes. Because the world is very loud, and you are the only thing in it that makes it quiet. She pressed her lips together. Her eyes were burning. She was trying to find the word, the one she'd been carefully, deliberately not finding for weeks. She had found it. Say yes. The voice came from behind her. Familiar, deeply, impossibly familiar. A voice she had last heard 11 months ago, cracked and frightened and saying goodbye over a bad phone connection. She spun around so fast, she nearly knocked over the chair. Her brother stood 10 feet away. Opiemi, older, thinner than she remembered, in eyes bright with something between joy and relief, and the particular emotion that only exists in the moment when someone you love comes back to life. Ope, she breathed. Hi, sis, he said, and she ran. She crossed those 10 feet so fast she barely touched the ground, and she hit him so hard he stumbled backward, laughing, his arms coming up and around her, and she held on with everything she had, both arms, both hands, her whole body, like she was afraid that if she let go, he would dissolve back into the 11 months of silence she had been living inside. You're here, she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. You're actually here. I'm here. He tightened his arms. I'm not going anywhere. She pulled back, held his face in her hands the way their mother used to. She checked him the way you check someone when you have spent almost a year not knowing whether to grieve. Are you okay? Are you? She asked. I'm okay, he said. I'm safe. I'm here. Her hands were shaking. She gripped his shoulders. I didn't know, she said. I didn't know if you were. I know. His expression shifted, became something quieter. I know. I'm sorry. I was hiding. I thought I was keeping you safe by disappearing. He glanced past her, over her shoulder, at the man still waiting by the table. I was wrong about a lot of things. Samara turned to look at Minho. He was standing where she'd left him. Ring box still in his hand, expression carefully neutral in the way that meant it was carrying a great deal beneath the surface. She walked back to him slowly, stopped in front of him. You found him, she said. I found him, he confirmed. How? Something passed across Minho's face, a flicker of something she might have described, in another mood, as sheepishness, though it didn't sit entirely naturally on his features. I had people searching for weeks, he said. He was careful, hidden well. A village outside Daegu. Fake name, different work, different appearance. A pause. When they located him, I went myself. Samara stared. You went yourself. I thought he might not respond well to strangers. He explained. Minho. She muttered his name in disbelief. I was correct about that. He did not respond well to strangers. He glanced at Opeyemi, or to me initially. Opeyemi, who had come to stand a few feet behind her, let out a short laugh. Initially is a generous word. I slammed the door in his face 4 nights in a row. Minho nodded. He did. You stood outside his door, Samara said, for 4 nights. Until he let me in. Minho met her eyes, which he eventually did. Because your husband is extremely stubborn, Opeyemi said, and also because on the 4th night it was raining and he showed up with 2 containers of jollof rice from a Nigerian restaurant in Daegu that I had no idea existed, and I wasn't going to turn down jollof rice in the name of principle. There's a Nigerian restaurant in Daegu? Samara said. There is, Minho confirmed. It took some effort to locate. The owner was very helpful once I explained the situation. She looked at him. This man, this impossible, infuriating, meticulous, irrelentless man who had driven to Busan to pay off a debt, and to Daegu to stand in the rain outside her brother's door, and to the Han River to do this, all of this, because she had once, offhandedly, mentioned that she'd never gotten to sit there and just breathe. How could I never thank you? She asked, tears stinging her eyes. Don't, he said. His eyes held hers. He was still on one knee. He hadn't moved. She looked at the ring, at her brother's face, alive and whole, and watching her with an expression so full of warmth it made her chest ache, at the river behind them, lit up and enormous, and finally, hers to sit beside. Yes, she said. Absolutely yes. Minho exhaled. Actually exhaled, like he'd been holding that breath since he got down. He slid the ring onto her finger, rose to his full height. And when she tilted her face up toward him, he kissed her the way you kiss something you have been afraid of losing, carefully, and then not carefully at all. Behind them, Opeyemi cleared his eyes' throat. You couldn't have waited 30 seconds? I had a speech. They ignored him. I had notes, he continued. Written notes, on paper, that I memorized. Minho finally lifted his head. We'll hear the speech at dinner, he said. Opeyemi pointed at him. I'm keeping the notes. You're hearing every word. And so they sat and laughed, all 3 of them, at the table by the river, with the violins playing and the lanterns burning and souls shining on the water. Opeyemi gave the speech. It was 4 minutes long and made Samara cry twice and laugh 3 times. Minho listened to every word without interrupting, which was perhaps the most remarkable thing he'd done all evening. They ate, and they talked, and they stayed until the candles burned low, and Samara kept looking at the river, at the way the light moved across it, at this enormous, beautiful, ordinary thing she had walked past 100 times without ever having the luxury of time to stop. Worth waiting for, she thought. She looked at Minho. He was already looking at her. Somewhere behind them, Opeyemi's voice floated on. Something about how better Seoul was in comparison to Busan, something about Daegu, warm and distant and unhurried. Their hands found each other on the table, fingers lacing together quietly, the way people touch when they've stopped needing to announce it. She turned back to the river. He did too. Everything worth having, she thought. She squeezed his hand. He squeezed back. Did this story wreck you? Comment your favorite moment. Mine was the romantic dinner and when he dropped down to one knee. Like this video if you sobbed when Opeyemi walked out of the dark, screamed when Minho came through that door, or decided right then and there that you deserve a man who drives to Busan before sunrise without saying a word about it. Subscribe for more Afro-Korean love stories that will have you forgetting you have work in the morning. Turn on notifications, because the next story is coming, and it is not gentle. Your comments tell me what to write next. So if you want more dangerous men, more slow burns that explode, more love that costs everything, show me. Drop a comment if you're ready, and don't forget to share this with someone who needs a love story today. See you very soon. And remember, some people come into your life like a collision, but the accident is just the beginning.